So here we are again, another blank sheet of paper. Not really sure what I'm going to do, but I'm thinking about a face in profile this time. And that's really the extent of it. Hi, I'm Sam Flegal, and I've been talking about overcoming artist block and how to get through the difficult times in your life when it feels like making art just isn't easy. So, yeah, just start putting marks on a page using a transparent burnt umber ink. It's an acrylic ink, watered down, and just kind of seeing what happens. But also thinking about art, thinking about those things. And you can already start to see a face in profile. And at some point, I start thinking to myself, well, why does he have this long nose and it looks like he's got an underbite? Maybe we've got an orc. Yeah, yeah, I think this might be an orc, but I'm just gonna keep making shapes, making lines, working with a blocky brush. and Let's see what happens. And after that dries, it's time to start going in and working with a little darker ink, not so watered down, and just start making shapes. At this point, I may even pull in just a little bit of reference. Maybe there's an image of an old person in profile or something I've got from doing this for over 10 years, just the store of references that I've built up. But for the most part, this is out of my head. It's just playing and making marks and trying to see what is. And, the thing that I've started to learn is it takes a long time. It doesn't take a long time to get started. You just start putting marks on a page, but the rest of it takes a long time. And these drawings started off just as a way to overcome a hump, a way to start making art again. And at first, they were an hour or 2 hours. But with this drawing, it really started to change. I started to lose myself in the process. And what started as ink drawings, as you'll see, it starts to become a painting. I start using acrylic and other opaque paint in order to put marks down on a page. And that'll be later. But I'm no longer stuck. I know what this is, what I want to do with it, and that all happened just from making some marks, but it still takes a long time. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today, because I've learned that anything worth doing takes a long time. You see, no one wants to hire you to do a half-assed job, and no one wants to buy art that looks half-assed or something you threw out quick. It takes time, but part of it is learning to love the process and getting lost in that aspect of the time. Just letting your mind wander and enjoying making shapes that are interesting to you and just going. There's no magic bullet. There's no golden brush. I mean, I'm sure I'll get asked. I can tell you that, I use a blocky, just a bright brush, square brush to block everything in. And I'm just, interested in making weird shapes. But when I start to refine, I do use a Winsor Newton Series 7. But honestly, that doesn't matter as much as you probably think that it matters. What matters is that I just keep going and keep making more interesting shapes and sit down. And all in all, while this is sped up quite a bit, the actual drawing process for this took me 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours. And previously, I'd really been struggling with sitting in the chair. I mean, maybe you can relate to that, where it feels like it's impossible to just sit down and make art. This thing you used to love feels like the hardest thing in the world. But then you put some marks down and you go and you realize you just lose yourself in that time. But part of it is because I'm drawing what I like. The freedom to just make marks and see what happens means that I'm engaging my imagination, my shape language. And similarly, you can do the same. You can engage your imagination and your shape language. And when you start to do those things, you start to make art that has more meaning for you. And I don't mean more importance. I don't mean to stress you out or say that it's like, you're making your opus. Just you're making stuff you like, and so you want to keep making it and keep getting better at it and keep picking away. And professional artists, I mean, the idea that I spent 4 hours on this thing, that's nothing. It's nothing. Professional artists spend 20, 30, 40 hours. I've spent hundreds of hours on paintings before, especially when I'm working in oil paint. And that's part of what was so intimidating about getting back into it, was the idea of sitting down for hours at a time just seemed so very hard, and I wouldn't do it. So it's like, well, I got to do something. I want to make some art. So what if I just make ink blobs? How hard could ink blobs be? But really, I was tricking myself, because I started to lose myself in it. And once I lost myself in it, then I started wanting to paint again. And I'm happy to say that I'm back in oil painting again, and I'm finding the joy of art and sitting down has returned, but it hasn't sped up. It still takes a long time to do this stuff. It still takes hours, even for a so-called, quick little sketch or a quick painting or a quick drawing. Next thing you know, hours have gone by. But that's the magic. I mean, that's part of what's really cool. Now, this might sound like advice from an old man, and maybe it is, but the one thing I really hope you get out of this video is to slow down. You've got a lifetime ahead of you. We all do. And there's plenty of time to make a lot of art, and there's time to practice, and there's time to get better, and you just have time. I know when you're young, there's this expectation that you're going to get it all done, or you want to get it all done, or you got to start that career. But the reality is, this takes a long time. Most people are in the art game for a decade or more before they really start to see true gains. It takes years, not just years to develop the network, but also to develop the skills. And we're all, in some ways, competing with people who've been doing this for decades as well, particularly if you're interested in client work. But honestly, that's why I would encourage you not to focus on client work. Don't think about spec work or trying to imagine what client you'd work for and where it would go and all that stuff. Just make art you like. And if you keep doing that, you will find that the clients come to you, assuming that you post that art and you share it on social media and you get it out into the world. You're not going to make it if you just keep it all hidden and you have this secret ability that no one knows about. But slow down, just chill out, and enjoy making some art. Spend the time to sit down and really make it great, because that's what people want to see. They want to see great art. They want to see cool stuff, and at a certain point, they want to back an artist like that. They want to spend their money there. And while chasing money can be a slippery slope, especially when you're making the art, at some point we all have to realize that art is a profession, or it can be. It can also make a great hobby, in which case you're in an excellent position, because you can focus on where your money comes from elsewhere and just really embrace the joy of painting, the joy of drawing, just having fun making stuff. But really, that kind of energy, if you can slow down and tap into that, your work's going to improve, because you're making stuff that you enjoy. Draw what you like. Let your mind wander. Don't chase clients. Don't chase collectors. They will find you if you're putting your stuff out. Your audience is out there, and it may be small. It's hard to say. There's just so many market factors in what makes someone a famous artist or a well-known artist. You may have a style that lends itself to an older time, and so book covers or games aren't wanting to use art that it looks old to them. But that doesn't mean it looks bad. I mean, there's tons of old art that's still amazing. We're talking about market factors. But you can still make art that you really enjoy. And if you keep doing that, you'll build your shape language, which is that you'll start to see forms and ideas repeat themselves. I know for me, I love big nosed humanoids, which is why I tend towards, old dudes and Vikings and wizards and, orcs and goblins and all that kind of stuff. It's fun for me. And really, if you're not having fun, you gotta wonder what's the point in all this? It's a lot of work. It's a ridiculous amount of work. And I'm not saying that it's all fun and games all the time, just that when you're in this phase, when you're in the creation phase, this is where that joy should kick in, the fun, especially if you can overcome that initial hurdle of sitting down at the easel, at the table, at the artboard, a piece of paper, and you overcome that blank sheet and you just start going. And for me, that's been the fun of doing these unprepared drawings where I don't know what they're going to become, and then they become something. And I really enjoyed that process, but it's all about taking it slow. Now, one of the things I get asked a lot about is how much do I practice? I do a mentorship online, and I worked with various mentees on their art, and it's a common question. It also sometimes comes up. I do a Patreon hangout every month where we talk about art techniques, Norse mythology, various history things that I enjoy. But mostly we talk about art and how to make art. And I do get that question a lot. How much do you practice? Which really the question there isn't how much I practice. What people are actually asking is how much should they practice? How much should you practice? And my answer may be disappointing because I don't really think of this as practice. I think that I'm making a painting. But I guess in some ways I am practicing. What you're watching right here is me practicing. Every mark I make is me practicing working with a brush. Every line that I draw across the form is me practicing with making a line and just going from there. So, I think that old adage of the muse finds you working, but great art finds you practicing. And if you adopt a learning mentality and a practicing mentality, but with the mind of creating finished pieces of art, I think that works so much better. And that's not to say if you're in the foundation phases where you're still trying to understand shadows or light, or you're still working with the building blocks of how to create people and forms, there is a certain amount of practice that comes in those early years of better understanding anatomy. You having trouble drawing hands, draw 100 hands in different positions, and you absolutely will get better. And those are all things that I did early on in my career. But there's a point, and maybe even career isn't the right word because it was kind of before my career, but there is a point where it's no longer about practicing, at least for me, and instead it's making art, but you practice as you go. And that's the other thing is, you want to get better at painting, make 50 paintings. You want to get better at drawing, make 50 finished drawings. And when I say finished, that can mean a lot of different things. And if you're having trouble figuring out where that finish is at, the thing I do and the thing I recommend is pick one, maybe two artists whose art styles you love, but also matches the way you want to work. It's really important that it match a finish you want to achieve. And just sit down in the chair and keep working. And at various points when you feel like you're done, set your art next to the other person's art. Now, you're not going to look at their art the whole time. This isn't about doing a master study or trying to copy their technique. It's just when you're finished, I like to imagine, what if these two pieces were in an art annual together, and one was on the left page and the other was on the right page? If these two images were next to each other, would they look like they belonged? And if yours doesn't feel to you like it belongs, then you start analyzing, okay, well, what has this other artist done to finish? How, maybe they have cleaner lines, or they have a better value structure, or they have a better focus point. Whatever it is, just make a list. And I'll actually pull out a legal pad or a notebook and start jotting down all the things I need to do. and then I set aside that piece of work. I don't look at it anymore and I go back to my painting, but I have my list and I just start checking off and doing each of those things until I start getting to a place where I want. And the first time you do that, it might take you twice as long to finish a piece than you've ever done before. And if that's true, you're probably onto something. There's a good chance that the amount of time is going to double or maybe even triple the first time you do this. But I think you'll also find when you start sharing this work, that's where you're really going to wow people. When an average person looks at work, a lay person, not someone in the arts, they can tell. They know inherently, what they like, what's good art to them, and what looks finished, but they won't be able to articulate that. That's not the kind of comments. Like, I've never gotten a comment online when I post a piece like, wow, your level of finish has really improved. No, you just get comments like, whoa, that looks sick, or that looks cool, or I love this, or it speaks to me. Because at the end of the day, art is a personal experience for the viewer. It's a personal experience for us in the creation of it, but it's a personal experience for the viewer. And when you create something that's to a level of finish, to a level of quality, that it just resonates with someone else, they will express it, but not in those exact terms. So if you're wondering about your level of finish or how to improve in that way, again, it's going to take a long time, but slow down. Don't be eager to finish art. Be eager to make art. Be eager to keep going until you reach the level of finish that the people you follow or this one particular artist whose style is speaking to you right now, that's your teacher. That's how you're going to learn. And not directly from them, but indirectly. I mean, think of all the people who have studied the great masters throughout the years. It's not like we've had access to their teaching, and yet we do. You can sit in front of a painting and reconstruct it, do a master study, compare your work to their work, and understand. And that's the great story of art that we've been telling each other now for thousands of years. Is every generation is learning and improving, and yes, the mediums changes, and what stories we tell, they change as well, but it's all growing on the back of what came before. And so there's nothing wrong with you growing on the backs of the giants who came before. And I think that's where all really great art stems from. I mean, at some point, everyone was a student, everyone was learning. But again, it takes time, and fortunately, you've got the time, my friend. You have all the time in the world. And so I encourage you, use your time, take it slow. Don't worry about practicing. Make art and practice within your art. Let your mind wander, draw the things you like. Keep a little notebook. I have an inspiration notebook where I jot down ideas, or when I find an article or a picture online, I'll actually print it out and physically paste it into this notebook, which becomes this artifact that you can then carry forward as through your career. And you can always reference it when you're feeling stuck. You flip through and you go like, oh, I've dealt with this before. I forgot about that, or oh man, this was a solution to the same problem. Why do I keep coming to this sticking place? But you just keep going. You're not chasing a specific career or a client. You're chasing your dream. You're chasing that need in your head to make stuff, that thing that all artists feel, that deep desire to create, to put something down on paper or canvas and see what happens. And just remember that anything worth doing takes a long time. And that's actually a good thing. That's really cool. Well, if you've made it this far in the video, thanks so much for hanging out and watching me paint this orc. If you liked it, click the like button. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. And follow me on social media. All those links are down below in the chat. Also, if you enjoy this sort of talk, I do a monthly hangout on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/samflegal. And every month on a Thursday evening, usually the third Thursday of the month, get together with artists and we talk about materials and I take questions. Sometimes we talk about Norse mythology, but it's really quite fun. It becomes something I've looked forward to every single month, and there's always room at the table for somebody like you to join us. So if that interests you, check it out over on Patreon. So anyway, I hope you're having a good day and that the art you're trying to make comes through today and you make just a little bit of progress in that lifetime journey that you've prepared to walk on. And just remember that it's going to take a while, so enjoy the ride. Thanks. See you next time.